As the proud children of science and reason, we have made ourselves the orphans of wisdom. Dr. Deepak Chopra. We cannot betray our spiritual nature without paying a great price. It is not that we have a soul, but that we are a soul. Dr. Rachel Riemann.
Welcome, everybody, to our fourth podcast. We're excited to have you here. This is Spiritual Resilience, and I'm Tana Burton.
And I'm Bruce Clement.
And we're excited to have you along for the ride today. We've been telling each other funny stories and are trying to get serious now, and it's going to happen. It's imminent. It's right here. And we're going to stop ourselves and just, dive in. Okay. So we have established that this channel is spiritual resilience, and we really want to talk about those things that are important to spiritual resilience, and the fact that in this world these days, it feels like we get farther and farther away from those tools as we become more and more frazzled. The problem is that these spiritual resilience tools are the very things that could help us become less chaotic and less frazzled. So we want to talk about those things. And today, the spiritual resilience tool that we'd like to address is connection. And really, I think that's what spiritual resilience is built on. I think it is connection. And we really want to talk about that in terms of our ability to speak and our ability to listen. And so I wanted to start out with a story that I have. Well, it's not so much a story as it is, I just want to share an experience of growing up. So we talked before about that I am a farm girl and grew up on the edge of the San Rafael Swell in Emery County, Utah. And we used to go out as a family onto the desert often. And at first, when I moved there, I was like, ugh, desert, ugh. There's nothing pretty here. And that's true to a California girl. And, at first, it takes some skill, I think, to see the beauty in the desert. And so I had to go on that journey. I had to learn that thing. And so my dad would drag us out as an old cowboy onto the desert. And I actually, as an adult, made him a Christmas gift one year that I had drawn onto a sweatshirt for him. And it was this cowboy on a horse on just absolutely flat land. And he's looking out and it says, "Beautiful country." That was my experience of the desert at first. It's like, where's the beautiful country? But it didn't actually take too long because he'd take us out there and we would go hiking around and we would go see different places like the Wedge and Buckhorn Draw and the natural freezer, box freezer. What is that called? Do you remember that place, Bruce?
Black Box. Where did you guys just come from? I know that you lived in California, but were you in Manti before that, or did you come?
We were in Mount Pleasant over the mountain in Sanpete County, which, by the way, is pretty. And then we moved to Emery County, and I'm like, oh my word. Anyway, and so I was a sixth grader, and so we'd go out on the desert and we would explore. And there are some places that are breathtakingly beautiful. I'm not going to lie about that. It's just the rest that isn't apparently breathtakingly beautiful. And so he would take us to different places. We would hike around and I would actually go out there with my friends as a high schooler and we'd hike and play. And, there are just these really rugged cliffs and barren landscapes, and then there are meandering rivers or creeks. I mean, I guess in Utah terms, we call them rivers. Everywhere else in the world, they would be referred to as creeks. And after a while, like after a year or 2 or 3, it becomes not that this is just another desert trip, but it becomes part of you. And I was developing that within myself where, you know, those raw cliffs were like my bones, and the meandering rivers were like my veins and vessels. And I really started to become in tune with the desert. So much so that my first trip to college, which I'm a professional student, but my first trip to college after high school down to SUU, my first major was in geology, structural geology with an emphasis in mineralogy. And guess where that came from? My developed love for the desert. And I got to tell you that there is no better place on this planet than the San Rafael Swell if you're a structural geologist with an emphasis in mineralogy. And so
There was
I
more
began.
than it was kind of like a family thing because it seemed like all of you siblings really enjoyed rocks.
We really did. Well, and plus, you know, my mother, you go on a trip with my mom and my dad, and my mom the whole time is, "Dawn, pull over, I want that rock." And dad going, "Oh my gosh, Darlene, I can't pick that up." "No, Dawn, I want it." This was a story of our lives. You know, swerving off the side of the road, stopping, getting out, getting rocks. So we all kind of grew up a little messed up that way. But and yes, my sister also, Mitzi, also wanted to do geology and did geology for quite a while. And Ben was interested. Your dad was interested. So anyway, it became part of me. And here's the cool thing about it is that the desert is very vast. It's empty. It feels empty. But one can learn to speak the language of the desert. And at first, you know, all of that stuff eluded me because I was just out there with my dad. He was making me go. I was, you know, doing the hike and getting it done. And I missed those subtle speakings of the desert. And I didn't enjoy it very much. But the more I went, the more I learned to hear. And the more I heard the desert speak to me. And it was a speaking that came from its heart, and it went into my heart.
What was spoken between you and the desert? What was that conversation like? What did that feel like?
I love that question. I think that the conversation at first was about nature. It was about, you know, the birds in the sky, the little reptiles scampering across the hot desert floor, and just their will to survive and their will to eke out a living in such a harsh climate. And of course, the rocks tell a story. They tell such a great story, so much history there. So all of those things, as I learned them, spoke to me about creation, about formation, about solidity, about erosion, about harshness, about how you can channel that to your good. And I began to hear those lessons ringing around me as I would go out there. And about stillness. The
Yeah,
desert
because
doesn't oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that stillness kinda rings true with me because I for those of you who don't know, I still live on this well.
Yes, you do.
I was I was born on this well, I grew up in this well, I've been to a couple other places, but this is kind of my home, and, when I came back, I really didn't like this area. It was just hard for me to kinda cope with, especially the desert was a little easier for me. Up the canyon here is one of the most remote, as is the desert as well. This is just remote country, and when I went up the canyon, now when I kinda look at it, um, it's just that there's nothing there but you, and everything inside you gets to cry out, and you have to get past that before you can start realizing what's being said to you from everything else around because it's so quiet. And
Yes.
if you don't reach that stillness, then you don't hear anything that's out there. You all you can hear is the internal discord, or even if you have other things internal that aren't discordant, you
Yeah.
still have to be still in order to feel just the vastness of the desert and the mountains here.
Yes. Agreed, and you got ahead of me, but I love you through it. Um, another thing about the desert is that it doesn't pretend to be anything else. It just hangs out all of its bareness right in front of you. And sometimes it takes your breath away with its beauty and rawness. And sometimes it causes you to suffer and struggle because it is harsh. And all of it leaves you wiser when you leave it, or for having experienced it, I guess is what I mean. And I remember my dad taking me out there in some places where there were deep, chasms, deep valleys, and steep rising cliffs of rock on either side. And he would teach me to yodel. He would yodel, and he would teach me how things echo back to you. And I find that fascinating that the desert taught me to speak and hear myself. And I think that's important for us. But it taught me my heart. It taught me to feel. It taught me to speak from my heart. And it taught me to hear with my heart. So let's
How
then
how
move
old
on
were
to
you how old were you when
growing
you
up on the
started to
desert.
feel No, you said you were in 6th grade when you kinda moved out here, but when when was that time when you started to feel like you how long was it before you felt like you had an appreciation for the desert?
Oh, probably a year. I would say by the time I was in junior high, because your dad, my big brother, was, he loved the desert. And if Ben loved it, then I loved it because I loved everything he loved and I did everything he did. And he was 4 years older than me. And so he was in high school and he'd drive me out there and drive us out there and friends or whatever. And we would have experiences. And honestly, if Ben loved it, I loved it. So that kind of is more what started changing my heart towards it. And all of creation loves Ben. I mean, animals, critters, little creepy crawlies, big, formations on Earth's crust. It all loves Ben. So when you're with Ben, you get things out of things that you just wouldn't any other way. And yes, maybe I idolize my brother, but it really is true as well. So, and especially as a high schooler, as I was studying geology in high school, we'd go out there on field trips for high school, and our teacher was fantastic. And he really worked us. He really put us through the paces and made us learn to see. And then because I loved it so much and was excelling, and there weren't any more courses in geology, he let me teacher aide for him and put me through a college course and let me lecture on field trips when we go out too. So my love for this is just growing and growing and growing this whole time. But I began to learn to listen, and I learned that to listen is to befriend. If I could go out to the desert and be still, as you were pointing out before, and allow myself to listen, I heard a friend. I heard a friend in the desert, in the creation around me. And I learned that to listen requires connection. And I think, and I'd love to hear everybody's opinion on this. I'd love to hear yours, Bruce, and everybody else. Do you think that we're losing our ability to listen, like really listen to each other's hearts? Because I personally feel like it's becoming a struggle. And I feel like there become more silos created where one silo won't listen to another. And it's creating a lot of pain, I feel like, within everyone concerned. And
I was actually thinking about this subject this week, as a matter of fact. Not directly along those lines, but just the fact that facts and science and reason and all of those topics tend to lead us toward an end result or a goal, and that turns into a strictness of following procedure, getting things done, and that takes you to the destination and gives you a result, which is often what we're looking for. But part of what I think you're saying is that we've become so result driven that the only thing that we want to find out from people is what they need us to do. And we've kind of lost that journey that you were talking about, where it's not just the result, it's how we get there. And I feel that the heart and spirit of who we are is what makes up that journey. So what we're willing to go through for that result, what we're not willing to go through for that result is us. Because there are several roads to walk, and the thing that determines where we walk and how we walk is who we are. And I really think that what you're saying is true, that we've become so dependent on results and so well adept at getting them that we're stepping over ourselves and the other people around us to get to them, and completely skipping over learning who we are and enjoying the journey along the way with those who are around us and ourselves.
yes. And I feel like along the lines that you're talking about, that when we get really, really focused on, our facts and our reasons and our all of these things that drive so many things nowadays, that where that ends us in is in a camp of rightness. And once we get into a camp of rightness, which what I mean by that is that we feel like we have the right answer, right? This is the way it is. This is the way it should be. And I've found that, I've lined it out, here it is. And now everybody that doesn't line up into that way of thinking is excluded. The camp of rightness does not have a place for those who think differently. And I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble in terms of our ability to connect with each other. And again, I feel like connection is the basis of that spiritual wisdom. I think it matters infinitely more that we be willing to connect and able to connect than it does to end up in a camp of rightness. I in fact am not interested in camps of rightness. I don't want an answer. I want more questions and more opportunity to connect and to discover together.
And I think that goes along a lot with the saying of no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, because that ability to listen and to come down and find out what is actually wrong or what somebody wants you to hear, even if it's not something that's going to immediately solve a problem or come to an end or fix something or put in your camp of rightness, that you have to be able to just listen where somebody is at and not try and fix them or show that you know what is right and what they're doing wrong, because most often that's not what people are looking for, and that's not a way to connect. Because like you said, once you've put yourself in you're right and they're wrong, then not only have you cut them off, but you've cut yourself off.
Yes, and you've cut off all dialogue. There's no more dialogue. It's over. And that is really, really isolating and very undermining of our ability then to be resilient. It's difficult to be resilient alone. It's so much easier to be resilient with a community of people that care. But anyway, back to, and I I loved all those thoughts. Thank you, Bruce. Back to the listening in the desert. What I learned is that the desert itself is a fantastic listener. And that when I listen, I hear the vastness of everything, including myself. And so the more we engage in listening, the more we can actually connect to each other. And in our connecting, I would hope that we would remember hearts. I would hope that we wouldn't connect in a way that serves our raw ambition. I hope that we wouldn't leverage connection to get ahead or to get something that we're wanting. I hope that we would connect from our hearts to the hearts of those around us. And I don't know, Bruce, what do you think are the benefits of being willing to connect heart to heart?
I think it's an ability to be able to see that even though that there are plenty of differences in ideologies and they seem like these great voids between people, and but I don't know that they're that big. I just think that we look at them from different perspectives. As a matter of fact, my favorite example of this, I don't even know if I've even told anybody this, but internally when I speak about this subject to myself, because sometimes I
love
have to
it.
listen to myself, is I had a roommate who he was an awesome human being. I loved him to death. And up at Utah State when I went, and we had a conversation one night. I think we argued. I say argued, but we both were kind of like, all right, I know you know, but I know, and this is why I'm right type thing. And it wasn't malicious at all, but we were both very passionate about what the subject. I don't even remember what the subject was, but it had to be a 6 to 8 hour discussion, just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And finally, at almost midnight, we're both exhausted, just kind of like, no, you got to understand this point. And he finally was like, wait a minute, I know what you're saying now, and that's exactly what I'm saying. And I just kind of looked at him
Right?
like, no, it's not what you're saying because it's different. And he started explaining to me, he's like, no, I'm looking at it from this direction, and it's the same thing. So it's kind of like the three blind mice all touching the elephant and going, no, it's a rope. No, it's a pillar. I think that we're all much closer than we feel on topics. And the closeness isn't in knowing more, the closeness is in being able to see that we're all people, we all have limitations, and really deep down, we want a lot of the same things.
We really do, because we're all humans, and we need each other, and we need the same basic things. And one of those things that is most important, and if we were all smart enough to learn from babies, we would be so much better off. But babies don't survive without connection. And yet somehow when we're adults, we think we do. How silly is that?
That that is that's a really hard thing for me to even think about in that context, because I don't think it's all just even like an emotional connection or a spiritual connection as we kind of talk about on this channel, but I think that's even a literal physical thing, because people don't touch much nowadays. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, people don't hug much. Sometimes they don't even shake hands. And when COVID came, man, you can just blow everything out of the water. And
Yeah. They refer to that as the cough cough.
the cough cough. Oh,
I
oh,
think we're not allowed to say that
that's
word.
right. We'll get banned.
The
I'm
Rona.
sorry. The Rona. And I probably need to look up the article. I don't want to. Anyways, I heard something about Elon Musk and his kid, and his kid is autistic, I think. And they went to the restaurant, and his son was finally like, I get it. We come here to eat with other strangers that we don't talk to. He just looked at him like, yeah, you're right.
I love it. I love it so much. Oh my word. Sometimes we just need those people that will call us out on what we're doing, right?
Right.
And call it what it is. That's hilarious. Unless you're my second son, who I could never ever teach the concept of a stranger to. There were no strangers in his existence, and he would walk off down the road with anyone that would listen to him or talk to him.
He's just a
He was
connector.
Yep, he was a connector, and he still is, and he and I will sit down and have a 3-hour talk, and with just the greatest of ease, and just come away from it feeling all these wonderful things and all this gratitude, actually, really. Um, because I think that happens too. When we connect with each other, we learn to feel gratitude in a deeper way and a more abundant way, I feel. Because as much as we wish we didn't have our stuff that we have in our lives, when we actually take time to connect to another person, we realize that we wouldn't trade. And it
Yes.
teaches us more gratitude for what we have. We also feel their pain and are grateful for our own helps and succor in times of need, and are grateful that we can be that for someone else. I think our gratitude increases exponential. At least I'm going to own that mine does when I connect with others. And is another reason I have loved my work over the last 15 years, because I have gotten that great opportunity to connect with people in their rawness, in their reality, in their truth, and walk with them. And there is not a single time that I have not come away from that blessed within myself.
I
Grateful for so many things, and grateful for that person and their brilliance, their innate brilliance, their courage, their willingness, their vulnerability. All of those things bless me. I'm sorry to cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say I've really come to learn through my own life experiences that it is just such a sacred place when someone is down at the lowest they've been and just stripped bare of all of the things. And we've talked about this before, and I actually realized that I have a very uh, poignant and personal example of all of these things we've been talking about. I don't know if we'll keep it in the edit. 'Cause I don't know how many people I've even told about this, but um, I was an idiot when I was in college.
No.
I know, I know, and
I've heard
I
of
thought
people like that.
I thought that I was gonna uh, do the right thing, uh, and was trying to earn money for college and stay in college for my second year, even though it wasn't going, or third year. And I'd gotten up there to college early, and there were no apartments available.
Oh.
And because everybody wants to clean the apartment the week before all the students get there, so the summer students leave, they clean, then they let you in. And since Logan's a college town, that's how everywhere, so it was either rent a hotel for 2 weeks, which was not really viable, or, find other solutions. And mine was camping up the canyon in my car.
Oh my goodness.
But I found a job, so I worked that job trying to save money, and I thought, I'm living in my car, don't have any expenses, what could go wrong, And so I was working long shifts and living in the car, and by the end of the second week, the first week, I almost got away with it. The second week, there was just something that was so missing inside of me that I took what money I hadn't blown on trying to buy food because I couldn't keep anything in a fridge, and I went to the
Mm,
movie theater because I had to be around somebody. I couldn't take it anymore. Um,
yeah.
and and it was so good just to sit with other. I had no idea who anybody was. Wasn't from there. No one asked me to go. I still remember the movie. It was Stardust. It was so vivid because that experience was very raw, and it was all because of my own stupidity and what I was gonna fix because I was just gonna do it, and I was too proud to do anything else. So I'm not saying that I recommend any of that, but that was a time in my life when I think I really learned that lesson the hard way, is just that everyone talks and feels like they're an island, but that's when it comes right down to it, there's a reason why we go to restaurants with strangers that we don't know to eat by people we don't know. And there's a reason why we go to movie theaters to watch a movie with people we don't know. And we probably won't even talk with or go to any other event or social gathering
Yeah.
at all. I don't think it's for the things that we're there for. I think it's for the people, whether they're known or not, that we want to associate with.
I love that, and we could go into some really delicious science about that because there are electromagnetic fields that we can now measure with a quantum. It's called the SQUID, which I don't remember what that acronym stands for, except that the Q is quantum. And it measures our electromagnetic field, and it can measure it off of our bodies in 15 plus feet in all directions off of our bodies. So when we are with each other, those electromagnetic fields are plopping on each other and around each other and mixing with each other and feeding our very souls in a very real way that we don't even realize. And when our brains are incoherent, our hearts seek to bring them into coherence and actually have the ability to do so. And so when we're around a group of people, their electromagnetic fields are plopping on us and helping us get more coherent in our hearts and in our minds as well, till we can settle those two into a lovely pattern with each other. And then that feeling of chaos, of abandon, of loneliness, of pain, of separation, of all of those things can decrease because of that. And there are actually some really lovely tools that we can learn that will bring our hearts and our minds into coherence with each other and allow us to plop our electromagnetic field on others to help them just by being in the room with them, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I
It's really
think that
true, and it's really lovely.
I think that really plays into the whole what we value as a society, and results versus journey is what we place the worth of people on, because there are a lot of things that place metrics on what people are worth, and I think that they're uh, first a straight up lie, like we've said other things are, but secondly, they really alter how we interact as a society. And Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who's one of my favorite speakers, uh, he talked about the fact that the reason why we have cities and why they're um, the place where everything develops, and the best and the worst things happen in cities is because we interact. There's connection. There's more chances for us to interact with people. There's more chances for us to connect. It's not that there's something, something special in the water or something physically there, except for people. The more connections you have, the more things you can build. And it's not just because they're smart, they've been to college, they've been all of those other things, or just strictly be from what a person knows. It's just because they're there, and our hearts can talk, and where our minds can't. It's a physical closeness, and I think that it's an actual thing, like you're saying, that can be measured. And even if it's not measured and we just have to take it on faith, I think the fact that we do gather in cities and live in places that are much more cramped than we have to are a big indicator that we want to be around people.
Yes, I agree. And so I think it would be a lovely thing if you and I and everyone that's listening would make a concerted effort to notice the person who is sitting in the corner, to notice the person whose hands are buried deep in their pockets and their heads are down all the time. and to go over to them close enough that our electromagnetic field can plop onto them. And let's connect. Even if we never open our mouths and say a word, although I'm not saying that that's the way we should go all the time. I think we need to learn to open our mouths and speak to each other heart to heart. But even if we're not opening our mouths and saying a word, we can help one another and connect with one another just by being present. Like you were saying with your experience going
Yeah.
to that movie.
Yeah, I I don't know who those people were, but I loved them.
Right? I
I
love
loved them
that. I
dearly
love
that night.
that.
It
And
felt
that's a
like
true
family.
thing. Yes.
It felt like a
They had
family
no
that night.
idea.
They had no idea. No one there
They
had
had
any
no
idea.
idea they were doing
No
that for
idea.
you.
No. And, with this connection thing, I mean, what does it behoove us if we are right and we're talking to somebody? I mean, we get to win that battle or whatever, but the other thing that can happen is just connecting. And so I think sometimes when we're talking with people, if we're just trying to get our view out of it or what we're wanting, we're missing the deeper person that we're talking with that we could get to learn. Because if we never try to learn something from somebody or connect with somebody who doesn't believe or think like us, that's not a very difficult thing to do. It's really easy to hang out with people that you know, that you like, that you feel like they think exactly like you do. It's a much more difficult thing to take time and listen to somebody whose opinions or values you may differ with, but that you can still connect to as another human being.
Right. It's really important. And I think it's really hard. You all let me know what you think. But for me, it can be really difficult to choose to connect over being right. Because again, remember we talked about those camps of rightness. And the thing they create is exclusivity. And the thing they do is end dialogue and end questions and end exploration. So let's choose to connect over choosing to be right. So you remind me to do that. I'll remind you, and we'll all improve slowly together.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that connecting through listening and speaking are things that necessarily happen spontaneously. I mean, I guess there are certain circumstances where they could, and you could notice them spontaneously, but I think that they happen through consistent effort. And I'm not talking monumental effort. I'm not talking we're changing the world with what we're doing. I'm not talking any of that. I'm just saying conscious, consistent effort will deepen and increase that to levels that I think we wouldn't even expect, kind of like my experience with the desert. I'm a California girl. It should be 75 degrees tops. There should be an ocean that I can hear at all times and redwood trees. I'm just- and I'm in the desert. Anyway, but I had to learn to see beauty in a very different way. And we can do that. As we connect with each other, we can learn to find beauty in very different ways, in very different places. So let's find, uncover, discover, recover our abilities to connect with others through speaking and listening. Anything you want to add, Bruce?
No, that was just deeper than I thought it was planning to go. So
Awesome. Good luck to everyone out there this week. We'll be working right along beside you, trying to improve in our connections. And well,
it's part of our thing now is the whole bless and connect. And I think connection
right.
is a blessing, and trying to bless is a connection.
Absolutely. Can't have one without the other. You can't separate them, can you?
No.
So go have blessed connections this week.
That's right.
We'll talk
right.
to you soon. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that now's the time we say like and subscribe, but even more importantly, we'd like to say take the time right now to care for someone today, whether it's yourself or someone else. And remember that wisdom is knowing we need each other. Have a blessed day.